The glass slipped from Amani's fingers and shattered across the restaurant floor before she could catch it. The sound cut through the dinner service like a gunshot, and every head in the room turned toward her at once. Her manager was at her side in seconds, his face arranged into the particular expression of a man who had been looking for a reason and had just found one. "That is the second incident this week, Amani." His voice was low and sharp and designed to carry. "I don't care what is happening in your personal life. When you are on this floor, you are a professional, or you are nothing." "I'm sorry," she bent immediately, reaching for the larger pieces. "The tray was unbalanced. It won't happen again." "It had better not." He leaned down to her level, which was somehow worse than if he had stayed standing. "One more mistake, and I am having a conversation with HR that you will not enjoy." She gathered the broken glass with hands that were not quite steady and carried the remains back to the kitchen without meeting anyone's eyes. She could feel the phones. She could feel the whispers assembling themselves into something that would circulate and be forgotten by next week, but would live in her body considerably longer than that. She pushed through the kitchen doors, walked straight through to the dry storage at the back, and closed the door behind her. The noise of the dining room reduced to a murmur. She pressed her back against the shelving and let her face do what it had been refusing to do all evening. The tears came fast and without dignity. "I cannot lose this job," she whispered into the dark of the storage room. "I cannot, not now, not when the deadline is tomorrow." Her breath was coming in the sharp, uneven rhythm of someone trying to stay quiet while falling apart. "I need a husband by tomorrow morning. I need a husband by tomorrow morning, or I lose everything." She pressed her hands over her mouth. The words sounded insane out loud. They were insane, and they were also completely, devastatingly true. What she did not know was that the storage room door had not clicked fully shut behind her, and that in the narrow service corridor just beyond it, a man in a precisely tailored dark coat had stopped walking when the crying began and had not moved until it ended. Baek Hyun-soo did not believe in accidents. He believed in information, and in the particular kind of clarity that came from paying attention when other people assumed no one was listening. Amani came out of the storage room 2 minutes later, composed in the practiced way of someone who had been composing herself in difficult spaces for a long time. She nearly walked directly into him. "Oh!" She stepped back, her professionalism assembling itself instantly over whatever had been on her face a moment ago. He was not a usual customer. She registered that immediately. Too still, too deliberate, the kind of person who occupied a room rather than just standing in it. Korean, early 30s, with a face that was all sharp, clean angles and very dark eyes that were currently watching her with an attention that was not unkind, but was absolutely not casual either. "I'm sorry, this is a staff area." "I know," he said. His voice was level and unhurried. "Excuse me." She nodded and moved past him and returned to the floor and did not look back, and did not notice that he watched her go with the expression of a man who has just decided something. After closing, Amani walked home instead of taking the bus, because the night air was the only thing she could afford that might help. Her phone rang before she reached the corner, her uncle's name on the screen. She stopped under a streetlight and answered because avoiding it would not change what it contained. "Tomorrow morning," he said without any version of a greeting. "I have been patient for 11 months, and I have done being patient. If you are not legally married by 10 a.m., I am filing the inheritance claim that afternoon." "She wanted me to have that house." Amani's jaw was tight. "She said so. You were there when she said so." "She wanted you settled, stable, married. Those were the conditions of the will, and they were her conditions, not mine. I didn't write them. I have a buyer interested. Serious money. You have until 10 a.m. The call ended. Amani stood under the streetlight with her phone in her hand and thought about her grandmother's kitchen with the blue curtains she had made herself, about the back garden where her little sister had learned to ride a bicycle, about the fact that her sister was 14 and had already been through enough change for several lifetimes and needed one thing, one single thing, to stay exactly where it was. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered out of the particular exhaustion that makes caution feel like too much effort. Miss Amani Adiemi. She recognized the voice immediately. The restaurant, the corridor. This is Baek Hyun-soo. Her spine straightened. How do you have this number?
I would like to speak with you in person. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock. Am I losing my job? Not unless you decline to listen to what I have to say. The line went quiet. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark of her small flat and ran calculations that did not resolve, no matter how many times she ran them. At 8 o'clock precisely, she arrived at the restaurant to find it empty of staff except for her manager, who looked at her with the apologetic expression of a man who has been recently outranked, showed her to his office, and then left without explanation. Baek Hyun-soo was behind the desk. He stood when she entered, which surprised her, and gestured to the chair opposite, which surprised her less. I own the restaurant group, he said before she could ask. I was conducting a site visit last night, unannounced. He held her gaze. I heard what you said in the storage room. The heat that moved through her face was complete and immediate. That was private. It was. I'm sorry. He said it plainly, without the performance of guilt, but with what seemed like genuine acknowledgement. I am telling you because I would like to make a proposal, and I want you to understand why I know what I know. She stared at him. He had a quality of stillness that she associated with people who had learned to not waste movement. His features were precise and even, the kind of face that looked like it had been assembled with care. Dark eyes under a clean brow, a jaw that held itself with the particular tension of someone who kept things in rather than let them out. He wore his suit the way some people wore armor. What kind of proposal? A marriage. The silence that followed was very complete. I'm going to need you to say that again, she said. A legal marriage, 1 year. Public and convincing, mutually beneficial to both parties. He said it with the exact tone of a man reading from a document he had already reviewed. Your grandmother's will requires you to be married to inherit the property. You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow. How do you know about the will? I investigate situations thoroughly before I act on them. You had no right to investigate me. You are correct. He did not defend it. Your grandmother's house is on Elmwood Road, 3 bedrooms, blue curtains in the kitchen. Your sister stays there on weekends. Your uncle has a buyer waiting and has been waiting for 11 months. He folded his hands on the desk. I know what is at stake. Imani looked at this man who had assembled the details of her life from a single overheard conversation with an efficiency that was either impressive or alarming, and she had not yet decided which. Why would you agree to marry a stranger? My grandfather controls the board of the company I have spent 8 years building into what it is. He has issued a condition. If I am not married within 3 months, he will restructure my position out of existence and install my cousin as CEO. He said it without drama. This is the situation. So we both need a marriage? Yes. That's very transactional. It is entirely transactional. I am not pretending otherwise. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back with the patience of someone who had already thought through several versions of this conversation and was prepared to wait for her to reach the end of hers. What do I get beyond the house? Legal protection of the property, a monthly arrangement for the duration, full financial separation, your own space, no obligations beyond public appearances. He reached to the side of the desk and placed a folder in front of her. It is all in the contract, every clause, nothing hidden.
She opened it. She read it with the specific attention of a woman who had learned not to sign anything she hadn't understood completely. The clauses were clear: separate rooms, separate finances, no physical requirements, confidentiality as a non-negotiable term, a settlement at the end that would mean she never had to worry about her sister's school fees again. "This is real," she said quietly. "Yes, you're a stranger. We have until 10 a.m. to be less strange to each other." He stood. "If you decline, I will not contact you again, and I will ensure your employment is not affected." He moved to the door. "But if you accept, I will make sure no one takes what belongs to your family." At 9:45 the next morning, Imani stood outside the register office in the blue dress she had bought for a job interview 3 years ago and never worn again. It fit differently than she remembered. Bak Hyun-soo stood beside her in a dark navy suit, his expression completely unreadable, his posture the exact posture of a man who had made a decision and was executing it without the luxury of uncertainty. "You can still walk away," he said, not looking at her. Her uncle's car was parked across the road. She had seen it when they arrived. He was watching through the windscreen with the expression of someone who expected to win. "I have a condition," she said. "State it." "If I ever feel like a piece of furniture in your life, if you forget I am a person, I leave immediately and you do not argue." "Agreed." He turned to look at her properly for the first time that morning. His dark eyes were very direct. "Are you ready?" She looked at her uncle's car. She looked at the register office door. She thought about blue curtains and a back garden and a 14-year-old girl who needed one thing to stay where it was. "Yes," she said. They walked inside. At 10:15, Imani Adeyemi was legally Imani Bak, and when they stepped back onto the pavement, she discovered that public and convincing had a specific meaning because there were cameras, several of them. "What is this?" she said, very quietly and very directly. "The announcement," he said, equally quietly. "If we do not control this story, someone else will write it, and we will not like their version." A microphone arrived. "Mr. Bak, is there a statement about the marriage?" He turned to look at Imani first. Something moved in his expression very briefly that she did not have an immediate category for. Then he looked at the cameras. "This is my wife," he said. The way he said it was not performative. It was simply stated, plainly, as a fact that he was not interested in qualifying. Her uncle drove away. Imani stood on the pavement outside the register office, having just done the most practical and completely unhinged thing she had ever done, and felt, for one startling moment, entirely powerful. The penthouse was nothing like her flat. It was nothing like anything she had ever lived in. She stood in the main room at 10:30 that night, looking at the city laid out below the windows, and tried to locate her own life somewhere in the previous 12 hours. "You can leave," Bak Hyun-soo said from behind her. "The house is secured. The paperwork is filed. If you want to sleep there tonight, I can arrange it." She turned. "I just made myself publicly Mrs. Bak. I'm not hiding in my grandmother's house the same night." "Then your room is the second door to the left. The staff will call you Mrs. Bak. My office is the far end. We will not be in each other's way." "You do a very convincing impression of a man who needs no one." He looked at her. "I have had a great deal of practice." She went to bed. She did not sleep well. Neither, she suspected from the light under his office door at 3 in the morning when she went to get water, did he. The headlines the next morning were creative and unanimous in their cruelty. CEO weds restaurant worker. Was it love or strategy? A gold rush with a ring? She sat at the kitchen counter and scrolled through comment after comment until her chest was so tight she could not read anymore. He came in and saw her face and said simply, "Stop reading. I did not know it would be like this. It will get quieter. It won't get quieter quickly." He poured coffee. "Would you like some?" "Please." She watched him. He moved through his own kitchen with the efficiency of someone who spent very little time in it. He placed the cup in front of her and sat across the island and opened his laptop, and they sat in parallel silence, and it was, unexpectedly, not uncomfortable. 2 weeks in, they attended his company's annual gala. She wore a deep rust gold gown she had found in a shop she never usually went into, and she wore it the way she had learned to wear things that made her nervous, like she had chosen it specifically and would not be apologizing for it.
The gossip followed her anyway. She caught the word waitress twice before the first hour was finished. A woman appeared at her elbow with a smile that had been assembled for maximum effect. Tall, Korean, extremely polished, the kind of beautiful that came with significant maintenance. "I'm Park Serin," she said. "Hyun-soo and I were together for 2 years. She let the pause do its work. "I'm just surprised. He always had such specific taste." Her eyes moved over Imani's dress in a way that made the assessment unmistakable. Imani held her champagne glass very steadily. "He does," she said. "It's one of the things I appreciate most about him." She smiled pleasantly. "It was lovely to meet you." Serin's smile faltered by exactly the amount that constituted a win. Baek Hyun-soo appeared at her side as Serin moved away, and she was not sure how long he had been close enough to hear. "You didn't need help," he said. "I'm aware." His gaze stayed on her for a moment longer than necessary. "No," he said. "I know." That night, he was working at his desk at 11 when she knocked. She was carrying a plate. He looked at it, then at her with the expression of a man encountering something he had not planned for. "You cooked." "I needed to do something with my hands, and your kitchen is very well stocked." She set the plate down. "Jollof rice. It is non-negotiable whether you eat it." He looked at the plate. Something shifted in his face that was not quite a smile, but occupied the same space one would. "Thank you." She sat in the chair on the other side of his desk, which she had not been invited to do and did anyway, and for a while they ate in the quiet of his office, with the city outside the window, and it felt like the most honest hour she had spent in that penthouse. "Why are you really doing this?" she said. "I mean, the real reason, not the grandfather and the board." He set his fork down. He looked at the wall for a moment as though checking what was available. "My grandfather has spent 40 years running this company on the principle that sentiment is a liability. He has passed that principle to me very effectively." He looked at her. "I wanted to prove that I could make my own choices, on my own terms. And marrying me is making your own choice? Choosing to help someone when I had the means to, and the choice to look away, felt like the most genuinely free decision I had made in a considerable amount of time." He held her gaze. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "That is either very cold or very human, and I cannot decide which." "Neither can I," he said, and she believed him. The weeks settled into a shape she had not expected. He paid her sister's school balance without announcement and without telling her, and she found out when her sister called to say the payment had cleared and asked what had happened. Imani walked into his office and stood in the doorway. "You paid it." He looked up. "Yes." "I didn't ask you to do that." "No." He looked at her steadily. "You didn't ask for any of this. You were not given the option of asking. I thought that since I had the means, and it was a simple thing to do, it was a simple thing to do." She stood in the doorway for a moment that lasted longer than she intended. "I don't want to owe you." "You don't. People who owe me know precisely what they owe me. The feeling you are describing is something else." "What is it then?" "I believe it is called being uncomfortable with kindness when you are not accustomed to receiving it." He returned to his screen. "You will adjust." She went back to the kitchen and stood at the counter for a long time, feeling something she did not try to name.
One evening, she found him asleep at his desk at 2 in the morning, his cheek on his folded arms, his face doing something entirely different from what it did when he was awake. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she went to the hall cupboard, got a blanket, came back and put it over his shoulders as carefully as she could without waking him. He stirred anyway, his eyes opened halfway. "Don't," he murmured.
Don't what? Don't look at me like I'm manageable. She almost laughed. I was covering you with a blanket. Same thing, he said, and closed his eyes again. She stood there a moment longer than was strictly required by the blanket situation. Then she went to bed. The contract leaked on a Wednesday. She was eating breakfast when her phone filled with notifications, and she understood within 30 seconds what had happened. Every clause, every term, the duration, the settlement, the words contract and arrangement and temporary spread across every screen that had ever had opinions about her marriage. She was still holding her phone when he came in. She looked at him. "You said confidential." It was. Someone with access made a choice they will regret. His voice was completely even. "I am handling it. They are calling me a hired wife." "I know. You cannot handle that with a legal team." Her voice cracked on the last word, which she had not planned. "You cannot make that quiet with money. They are saying I was purchased. They are saying I was a transaction." She stood up. "You knew I was a transaction. I knew it, but I did not know the whole world was going to know it before I decided what I thought about it." "Imani, don't." She shook her head. "I asked for one thing. I said don't make me feel like a prop, and I am currently on the front page of 4 news sites with the word contract printed next to my face." He stepped toward her. "I will fix it." "I don't want you to fix it." Her voice was very quiet. "I want to have been treated like a person from the beginning, instead of a solution that needed to be managed." She picked up her bag. "I need some air." "Imani, I'm not leaving. I just need to not be here for a few hours." He did not stop her. She walked for 2 hours. She went to her grandmother's house and sat in the kitchen with the blue curtains and drank tea and let herself miss the simplicity of a life she had thought was the problem and now recognized as the thing she had been most honestly herself inside. She sat there for a long time. Then she went back. He was in the sitting room. He was not working. He was simply sitting, which she had never seen him do before. And when she came in, he looked up with the expression of a man who had been doing something he did not know how to name. "I said I would fix it. I should have said I was sorry first." She sat in the chair across from him. "Yes, you should have. You told me at the beginning that if you ever felt like a prop, you would leave." He held her gaze. "And you stayed. I went for a walk. You came back." Something moved in his face. "I noticed." She looked at him. "What are you saying?" He was quiet for a moment. "I am saying that I am not certain when this stopped being a strategy for me. I am saying that I find myself thinking about what you said in conversations after the conversation has ended. I am saying that the morning you put a blanket over me, I was not asleep as I appeared, and I lay there thinking about it for an hour afterward. Hansu, I am not good at this. I have been trained out of it very specifically, but I know what it feels like when something is real, and I know what it feels like when something is a strategy, and this stopped being a strategy without my permission." She looked at him for a long time. "I'm still angry with you. I know. The leak was a humiliation, yes, and you cannot just say a true thing and have it erase the other true things. I know that too." He did not move toward her. He gave her the space. "I'm not asking you to erase anything. I'm telling you what is true, because you have told me from the beginning that you will not be managed, and I am trying for the first time in a long time not to manage something." She exhaled slowly. "What happened the next morning matters," she said. "What you do when the cameras are not there matters." "I know." The board meeting was on a Friday. She heard about it afterward from his assistant, who told her with the specific awe of someone who had witnessed something they had not expected from the person they worked for.
He had stood at the podium and said that his marriage had begun as an arrangement, and that somewhere it had become something else, and that he was not interested in pretending otherwise. He had taken the contract from his jacket pocket and torn it in front of the board and the cameras. He had said he was not divorcing his wife. He had said that if it cost him his position, then that was the price, and he had decided it was worth it. She heard all of this while standing in her grandmother's kitchen with a cup of tea, and her sister doing homework at the table, and her phone ringing with a number she recognized. She did not answer the phone. She waited. An hour later, she heard a car outside. She looked through the kitchen window and saw him standing in the front garden in the rain, which in Seoul in November was a specific kind of rain that meant business. She opened the front door. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to say it to your face rather than at a podium." She leaned against the doorframe. "You tore up the contract?" "Yes." "In front of the whole board?" "Yes." "That was dramatic." "I am not usually dramatic. I found it appropriate for the occasion." He was soaked. He did not appear to find this relevant. "I told you at the beginning that I choose for myself. I am choosing." "You might have lost your company." "I might have." "For me?" "For the version of myself that I have been remembering how to be since you put a blanket on me at 2 a.m. He held her gaze through the rain. "I don't want a contract. I don't want a year with an exit clause. I want to learn how to do this properly with someone who will not let me get away with being less than I am capable of being." She was quiet for a moment. That lasted as long as it needed to. Her sister appeared behind her in the doorway, looked at Hyun-soo standing in the rain, looked at Imani, and went back to her homework with the wisdom of a 14-year-old who understood more than anyone had told her. "You're soaking," Imani said. "Yes." "Come inside." He looked at her. "Is that a yes?" "It is an invitation out of the rain. The rest is a conversation." She stepped back from the doorway. "But yes." He came inside. Her grandmother's kitchen with the blue curtains and the cracked tiles and the smell of jollof she had made earlier held the two of them in the particular quiet of something that had just become real. She made him tea. He sat at the table and wrapped his hands around the mug and looked around the room with the expression of someone encountering something they had not expected to find important. "This is what you were protecting," he said. "Yes." "It's beautiful." She sat across from him. "No more contracts," she said. "No more contracts. No more managing." "I make no promises about the managing. It's an old habit. I will try." She almost smiled. "Honest. Always, with you, it turns out." Months later, the garden was full. Her sister was on the grass with the neighbor's dog. Hyun-soo was at the barbecue, attempting something that had started as chicken and was developing into a situation. She stood at the kitchen window, watching him consult his phone for the 3rd time in 5 minutes, and felt the specific warmth of a person watching someone try very hard at something small because the stakes of the small thing matter to someone they love. She went outside. "It's burning." "I am aware." He did not look away from the grill. "I run a company with 400 employees. And yet, chicken is not different. Chicken is not different." She took the thongs from him. "Go and sit with my sister. I will finish this." He surrendered the thongs without argument, which she noted as growth. He went and sat on the garden bench, and her sister immediately started telling him something about school, and he listened with the full attention he brought to board meetings, which she had noticed he gave to anything her sister said, and which was one of the things she had stopped trying to feel something about. "No contracts," he called across the garden. I turned the chicken. "No contracts." "Just this?" She looked at him across the garden, at this man who had offered her a transaction and stayed for something else, who had torn up a piece of paper in front of a room full of people and then stood in the rain outside her grandmother's house because the formality of it had felt insufficient. "Just this," she said. He looked at the garden and the house and her sister and then at her. "That's enough," he said. "That is considerably more than enough." If you made it to the end of this story, then you already know it was never really about the will or the contract or the company. It was about two people who were both, in their own way, trying to protect something they loved, and who found out along the way that the thing worth protecting had changed shape on them. Hit that subscribe button right now because we have more stories coming, and every single one of them is worth your time. Leave a comment telling me which moment in this story got you the hardest. Was it the torn contract, the blanket at 2 in the morning, or the man standing in the rain? Like this video so more people find it. Tell me where you're watching from, because this community is something I am genuinely grateful for, and I want to know who is in it. We will see you in the next story. This one is only the beginning.